But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win. We choose to go to the moon.
What happens when 90% of the media is controlled or owned by 6 corporations? What happens when those same corporations are operated and controlled by a political ideology? What happens when the news is no longer free from bias? What happens when the news is no longer reliable and independent? What happens when the news is no longer trustworthy? Fact becomes fiction? Fiction becomes fact? When does news become propaganda?
Wow, that was scary. Welcome to World Blockchain Roundtable. This is a show that is a DAO-based podcast, a DAO-managed podcast, and the longest-running DAO-based podcast in all the world. DAO meaning decentralized autonomous organization. And by the way, today's show is episode 263, 263 weeks of the World Blockchain Roundtable. And we are going to go back in time. No, this isn't like, the Marty McFly movie. Now, this is Blockchain Time Machine. But before we travel back in time, joining us today, we will have Andrew Joseph. Welcome,
Hey, what's
sir.
going on?
We had Zach here. It looks like Zach disappeared on us. Maybe he jumped on the time machine before we could. Maybe we'll find you somewhere back. What? It happens.
It happened,
And cross our fingers, Lisa, Greg, or Satoshi Sean will show. And they can travel back in time with us. But for now, it's just you and me. Last week's show was really good, by the way. I enjoyed it, and it was, let me pull that up. I didn't have my notes ready. By the way, by being on the show, participating on the show, you get to earn world lots tokens or layer ownership tokens on din.social. And last week, when to fork a blockchain, that was a good one, but it was everyone received 66 lot. Well, the host received 66 lot. Each topic contributor received 25 lot. And last week's theme was suggested by I am for I am. I am for I am myself,
Right.
A.A. William. And I received an additional 25 lot for suggesting that topic. But this week, it is blockchain time machine. And what would you change? And next week's show, by the way, is 17 years of Bitcoin, what we've learned. I thought maybe next week we might be going into a little bit of this, hijacking Bitcoin.
That sounds like a good deal.
Yeah. What have we learned? So that's next week. So we're kind of talking about things in the past, but we always end the show on current events. So you're going to go through various time portals today on the show. So we welcome everybody who's watching, listening, wherever you're watching or listening. Be sure and give it a thumbs up and, a like and share and comment and get involved in the chat, all those good things. And so without any further ado, are you ready to dig into and join our time machine? You ready to go for a ride?
I am.
Andrew?
Hey, making a wild ride on the wild side.
Yes. All right. So moving on to episode 263. Let me pull that up. Here we go. And on the stage, there's our time machine portal. As you can see, we got the World Blockchain Roundtable in this cloud, and we're going to enter that and go back into time. And then you and I will discuss what we find and see. Uh-oh, Andrew seems to be clocking. I don't know what happened. But let me take there. There he is.
I don't
What
know why,
happened?
but there we go. I'm here back.
Yeah, traveling through time and space and time continuum, kind of changes things around a little bit. But here we go. Here's our first question. So, if you could go back in time and see who Satoshi Nakamoto was, who do you think you would find? Who do you think you'd find there, Andrew?
Oh man, I think someone, if I was talking about Satoshi Nakamoto, someone who is, probably been through a lot and knows a lot of people and is just looking to find a way to subvert the system, obviously, but really it's somebody who's trying to, just blend in with the crowd as much as possible. He doesn't want to cause a lot of trouble. He's obviously smart. He's obviously, motivated towards trying to find a way to find a peaceful solution to all these difficult problems that keep complicating our day-to-day lives.
Yes.
So
yes.
And he's definitely
Without
persistent.
What if on an anagram, what would you probably, given the white paper, what who we speculate and all those kinds of things, what personality type would you give him? Him or her or they?
And the perspective in Enneagram, it's what they would call the hate-filled ghost. Somebody who's really smart and who's, like I said, has been through a lot. So probably definitely persistent. Like we're very persistent in that way. But someone who just knows how to blend well within any crowd. He just he just kind of glides through the situation and
yeah. So what would that number be?
That would be 4, 5, and 9.
A 4, 5, and 9 on it.
The individualist, the investigator, and the peacemaker.
Right. Well, I used to think that it was Adam Back. And so if I went back into time to, see the original, cypherpunk movement and seeing who it was. And I guess if you go back in time, that means you also got to travel, right? Maybe we'd find him in England somewhere, maybe London. Because there's a lot of people that speculate that he was English or had an English background. And I may have lost Andrew again. Maybe he's having some internet problems as we're back in time looking for Satoshi. But I used to think it was Adam Back. And I remember there was a video, I don't know, probably 2018, 2019, took a pretty good deep dive into that. And that deep dive looked, it seemed, well, it was convincing me, that documentary. And then I would fluctuate, and I think maybe it was Hal Finney received the first blockchain transaction. And so did he send it to himself? A lot of people would speculate that. And the wallets that are the addresses that seem to be locked and held up, nobody knows who, really controls those private keys. Are they lost? Are Satoshi's coins lost? By the way, there's been a lawsuit, someone trying to claim them as unclaimed property, but they would need their private keys. And that's going in the courts. There's Andrew again. And so I kind of think that, I used to think it was Hal Finney. And Hal Finney unfortunately passed because of he had ALS. And that might explain why he and his family, the private keys were lost, and why, billions and billions, I don't know, at one point it was over $100 billion, $200 billion worth of Bitcoin were locked up in what they believed to be Satoshi Nakamoto's first wallet from mining Bitcoin. And maybe those are kind of locked up forever. Nobody will be able to access them, and they'll just sit out there. Other people thought, what's that?
Some people, there was some talk about a Bitcoin fork recently, and they were talking about how they were going to try to retroactively free Satoshi Nakamoto's coins. And I don't think it's going to go over too well within, the real hardcore people's perspective of what Bitcoin should be. So
that's kind of like a pre-mine, in my opinion. How you would do a pre-mine. I don't know if I like that idea or not.
No, neither.
But Simon Dixon, do you know who he is, Andrew?
Not off the top of my head. The name sounds familiar, but
yeah, he gave the first talk about Bitcoin. Early investor. He's probably second next to Roger Ver as far as investing in the first company. But he invested in Blockstream and in Coinbase and you name it. He was early in, and he met a lot of the people in London who are thought to be Satoshi. Now Hal Finney was not in London; he was in the States.
Yeah,
and he has a different take. He believes that Satoshi Nakamoto was actually Lynn Sassaman. And he believed that Lynn for sure wrote the white paper. And I think he had met him. He's met Adam Back. He's met Nick Szabo. And he's met early on. And because he went to kind of this flat where these cypherpunks were working on in secret, shall we say. And Lynn was there and was certainly his background, his knowledge and information was right in line with all of those same people, way of thinking and this kind of thing. But unfortunately, Lynn was also suffering from depression from time to time. And he also had some neurological problems. And his wife had traveled to the US and couldn't get a hold of him and was calling. And finally she called a friend, and this friend went to their apartment and sadly found Lynn Sassaman. He offed himself with a rope in the closet. The story goes. Now, remember, there was also a time frame there that who was it that was taking it to the CIA, had been invited to go to the CIA and talk about Bitcoin, who had then became kind of the controller of the keys.
The core developer. I want to say Gavin Andreessen.
Yes, I think it was him. And was it Kevin that met with the CIA? I can't remember. Well, anyway, Lynn, if he was Satoshi, that was when he disappeared. Well, that also coincides with him Epsteining himself, or Epstein didn't do it himself. How we want to put it.
Uninstalling himself, yeah.
There you go, uninstalling himself. So Lynn, it kind of matches that time frame. So if I were to go back in time, and Simon Dixon knowing some of these people and being early to the Bitcoin show, I think Simon makes a very strong point rather than Adam Back being Satoshi Nakamoto and believing it was Lynn Sassaman. So, and he really believes that Lynn Sassaman wrote the white paper. So it doesn't mean that if you wrote the white paper, it doesn't mean that you were the core developer of Bitcoin, but more than likely you are or were. So, if we went back to that Genesis block, it would be interesting to see just prior to that Genesis block what they were thinking, what they were talking about. And some people think, oh, well, it was, and even Simon Dixon thinks that it was a intel agency that helped fund it or create it. So what do you think about that topic? If we went back in time, do you think we'd find the CIA, the Mossad, or MI6 involved?
I mean, I definitely, we talk about the hijacking Bitcoin book. There's a bunch of stuff in there about, stuff that, and then I know that it came out that, Jeffrey Epstein had gotten involved and stuff like that. So I could definitely see it. I don't know how you would, retroactively pinpoint it. And try to source, all this interaction. But I mean, like I said, it's been talked about. So I know back on Bitcoin Talk when they were talking about this during the block size wars, they were talking about how they were working towards like doing IP tracing and stuff like that within the Bitcoin core code, and there was some blowback to that. There was a lot of people that were getting upset about that. Right. And I mean, I was upset about it. This is supposed to be 100% private in theory, but not in practice. Obviously, you got different cryptos now that are trying to alter themselves in such a way that you can't trace it, like Monero and Tari is another one that just launched a while ago. That's trying to be like Monero, but be distinct and different. So. I mean, I can only hope that there is some kind of, really potential strong push from a different development team that carries out that independence minded, privacy focused crypto that is successful. And we've seen a lot of success, like I said, with Monero and stuff like that. So I don't know. There's a lot, there's always going to be questions. It's something you just had to learn to live with. Some people get really upset and I don't like all that risk. Well, just because you don't like the risk doesn't mean that the risk doesn't exist. It's always going to exist, and you have to learn to live with it.
Right. I'm going to give a homework assignment to those who are listening. No. If you want to know who Simon Dixon is and his theory of who Satoshi Nakamoto is, and because he was so close to that group, and there's a podcast gentleman by the name of Tom Bellew or Bailu. I don't remember. And he was on Simon Dixon's. Simon Dixon was on his podcast here in the States just a few days ago. It just got released a few days ago, maybe 2 days at the most. And all you got to do is, let's see, in YouTube, search "They're Deliberately Winding Down America." Because Simon Dixon is a savant when it comes to global economics, and he kind of grew up in the whole large financial world, and certainly jumped into the Bitcoin space very, very early with a lot of cash already, and so and saw Bitcoin as certainly more of a libertarianist perspective and a way to change the world for for the good. And you could hear his take on geopolitical wars that's happening between the tech bros and the central banks and governments and who's in charge and all that kind of stuff. But it's a 2-hour and 21-minute podcast. But if you go to the last 20 minutes, I think it is, or 21 minutes, they close with his description of who he believes and why he believes that Lynn Sassman was Satoshi Nakamoto. And because he knew these individuals and was so close to it, his speculation is probably far better than any of us. So I encourage you to check that out.
I'll pull up the window real quick if you want to throw it up there, just so people can look and see what it looks like.
There we go. Cool. Glad you did that. Yeah, it's this guy right here. That's Simon Dixon, and that's the one that you want to listen to and get kind of the inside story. And like I said, it's the last segment of the podcast. We're obviously not going to play 21 minutes of it here. Probably get a copyright strike for it. But it's fascinating. I actually started watching the whole thing a second time, or listening to it, because that's what I like to do if I'm walking the dogs or something. Put on the headphones and put it on 2x or 2.5x speed and download that information as fast as I can. But it was very good, and his description has really changed my thinking of who Satoshi Nakamoto is. So, all right, we've been to 2008, 2009, trying to uncover who Satoshi Nakamoto is. It's time that we move to a different time. And we're going to go forward just a little bit, same time frame, and we're going to whisper in the ear of Satoshi Nakamoto. All right, Andrew, you with me?
All right.
Sounds here good for the ride? Man.
I'm here for the ride.
2009. Here's the question. If you could go back to 2009 and whisper one change to Satoshi Nakamoto before the Genesis block, before the first Bitcoin is mined, what would it be and why?
Oh, man.
You go first, or you go first?
You go first if you want.
Well, I would probably, because I'm going back in time and know the future, I would probably say we have a chance to eliminate the Bitcoin, the blockchain wars. And I would whisper in his ear, make a change to the white paper and really tell us what you think about block size limits. 1 megabyte to 4 megabytes, or add in a built-in scaling roadmap in the white paper, or just go ahead and put it in there ahead of time, before you write the first block, so that it will just automatically scale as necessary to keep the fees down and to keep it as peer-to-peer. If whispered that into Satoshi Nakamoto's ear and he listened to us and heeded us, there would be no blockchain war. BCH would be Bitcoin. ABC would be Bitcoin. All of that would be Bitcoin. Bitcoin would have less chance of being captured, I would think. And who knows? It might remain more decentralized. And but that would be one. If the time machine will give me additional time with him, I might suggest that he add a privacy protocol to Bitcoin to make it more private, or a mixer on top of it or something, or put in the white paper future plans, or the next step will be making Bitcoin a privacy coin, to work like cash, because cash is harder to track. And I think that would be the second thing I'd whisper in his ear. All right, Andrew, I had my say. I whispered into Satoshi's ear. What say you, sir?
Well, I mean, really the big thing comes to mind is Bitcoin Cash has got this thing integrated into the blockchain now, where you can go up to a certain amount of blocks
Mhm.
as a mechanism to prevent it being 51% attacked.
Dynamic.
I can't remember it, dynamic, yeah, and I would definitely push for that. Another thing is maybe follow in line what Monero did, and even the stuff that they've come out with now is where
Right. Right.
you mix the transactions in and makes it really difficult to guess where who goes to where and what for what. But I mean that's a big ask for somebody who's just coming out with something new. So
In this picture, Andrew, you look like Mr. Anderson in the
oh yeah,
Matrix whispering into Satoshi's ear.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well, if I only had hair.
I think you got a bald wig on, and you actually do have hair, and this is part of your remaining anonymous on the
Right.
podcast in the podcast world. That's my store. I'm sticking to it, Andrew. I support
right,
that
well.
hair that's underneath that mask.
Okay, maybe I'll show up on Fox News and wear another mask.
Oh my gosh, that was freaky, right?
Right.
But yeah, so see, we're in agreement, Andrew. I think that to prevent the block size wars, right? That's a huge
Yeah.
one. If you would, all right, moving on. We got soldiers on top of Bitcoin.
Okay.
Here we go. Now we fast forwarded to 2017 in our blockchain time machine, and it says the question asks, if you could travel back to 2017, which in our case we're in 2009, we're going to the future, and could change one thing about the Bitcoin block size wars that led to BTC BCH hard fork, what would it be?
Oh
All right,
man.
Andrew, you go first.
If I could travel back to 2017 and change one thing. Oh.
Pre-blockchain wars.
Yeah,
or would you
a
just let
pre-block.
it play out and be a witness? That's an option too.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say the segregated witness. I would just say that's just a waste of time and
That's where I was
try to
going.
find an alternative. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the best thing I can say. I mean, if you've got all these different, you had these different implementations, and so just
Right.
look, you've got these implementations. Just go ahead and create your own node and your own blockchain out of it.
Right.
The segregated witness just didn't work
Right.
like they wanted it to. I mean, they did their best, try to come to consensus, but it couldn't work out. The censorship is a big thing too. Once the censorship
on the
showed
Reddit
up,
page,
yeah, Reddit and BitcoinTalk.org, stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly where I was going to go. I was going to say, I prevent the activation of SegWit. That was that New York agreement for the miner signaling, and that really sent us down the road to minimizing any kind of increase in the blocks, and then that probably would have eliminated, what was it, USA? I always think of USF.
UX.
Yeah, it's that coercion to for people with their nodes and signaling for soft fork or whatever. I think we could have, that would have been eliminated, and because we both, I think, Andrew, you and I both agreed that the real fix in the 2017 blockchain wars would have been that dynamic block sizing based off of volume. And so the market would dictate the size of the blocks. And so it would, again, that would, just like you said too, it would eliminate the need for censorship and that all those social attacks and the DDoS attacks and the pressure to, fight is it store of value or is it peer-to-peer electronic cash? All of that kind of goes away. And it wouldn't be such a civil war.
It was UTXO, unspent transaction amount.
Yeah.
Unspent output, I should say. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think that's, if we could go back in 2017 and make that change. Another option, bit crazy, another option would be, and certainly the governments wouldn't do this, but if we could have lent a lot more money to Roger Ver so that he could acquire more miners and buy more miners to signal towards a larger block size, then that Bitcoin would have won their attempt to keep it as digital, their attempt to keep or make Bitcoin digital cash, not digital cash, but more, I'm confusing myself here, a store value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then the miners would have signaled towards a larger block if Roger Ver could have had more money to invest in more miners. So,
I mean, I think that probably would have helped, but that would have been a temporary short-term solution to a longer problem.
Probably the war would have continued. It would have been just a battle won and more battles in the future. Yeah, because ultimately we're going up against the industry, right?
Right. I mean, it looks like from my perspective, we're no longer, in a state of constant decrease in price for Bitcoin Cash.
Right.
And it's not investment advice, it's just my personal perspective about the situation. So we're definitely in a state of, potential, long-term success as a blockchain, not in a financial way, just as, actually producing and creating and growing as a successful alternative to Bitcoin Core.
I agree. All right. Uh-oh. You mentioned Epstein. Now we got a question about it. Now we're back. We're going back in time again to 2010.
Okay.
Here's our question. I wonder what the audience thinks about this. If you could travel back to the early 2010s and change one thing about how early institutional money, including controversial figures like Jeffrey Epstein, entered the crypto space through brokers like Brock Pierce, what would it be? What would you see? What do you think you would see? What do you think you would hear? It's pure speculation on our part. But remember, Brock Pierce is the one who created Tether. We have a stowaway in our time machine. It's none other than Greg Lang. Good morning.
Hey, what's going on?
Good morning, guys. How are we all?
Yeah, not bad.
Today's episode, Greg, is really good. It's the blockchain time machine. What would you change? And what would?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually hoping that my arrival just now might be a useful point to make about time travel itself. And
exactly.
And the thing that I would change, let me catch up with where you guys are before I just jump into that.
Well, we already discussed if we could go back to pre-2009 and go to the cypherpunks, who do we think we would see as the actual Satoshi Nakamoto? And Simon Dixon thinks it's Lynn Sassaman, who unfortunately deleted himself.
Yeah.
And he believes for sure he wrote the white paper, and he met most of those cypherpunks in London.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think obviously it was a group of people, first off, right? Satoshi was a great avatar. I think that we can conclude that one strong contributor to that mass entity is definitely Hal Finney, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, the weird coincidence about the word synchronicity, I guess, about a guy with the last name Satoshi who was for a moment believed to be the creator, just lived down the street from Hal, right?
Right. Strange.
And we also can't ask Hal anymore because he's no longer with us.
Right.
Which is
ALS got
tragic,
him, unfortunately.
but
Another
also
brilliant
comports
mind.
with the lack of activity on the progenitor wallet, right?
Mhm.
So
The second time machine movement or change as we were traveling through time was would you whisper into Satoshi's ear just before he mined the Genesis block?
yeah,
And I suggested that he make the block size dynamic and make that big portion inside the white paper. Talk about that more so that it might prevent the blockchain wars in 2017. Or my second option, if I was given the second one, was privacy. Andrew thought the same thing too, that we should not, we should try to avoid the block size wars.
mhm.
And,
I would probably whisper this in his ear. I've been like, "Hey, buddy, you do realize that final global settlement is a very expensive aphysical fiction, right?"
right.
Could you translate that into English, sir?
A lot of
He's
stuff
Japanese
happens
after all.
simultaneously in the present that is unconnected.
Mm.
The illusion that it doesn't is an expensive one to maintain.
Good one.
Thanks. Japanese is definitely comes through and understands.
Yeah. Then we fast forwarded in our time machine to 2017, and we said, what would you do or say or observe during the 2017 block size war, Bitcoin block size war? Would you get involved? And Andrew and I both agree we probably would have prevented the activation of SegWit, and all of that other stuff might have been prevented.
Yeah.
Might have been a battle one, but not a war one.
I'd probably gone one step further in the same vein as before. Right? I would have said something like, maybe the block header should not be the measurement.
Mm. Yeah, it should be market based, right?
Maybe what we call a block header is really just downstream artifact of making the mistake that I would have whispered in Satoshi's ear not to make.
Good one. And then you popped in here because our time machine went back again to the early 2010s when institutional money started going in and funding Bitcoin Core.
Mm-hmm.
And this enters into, Jeffrey Epstein's role. Bitcoin, remember, has already been created.
Well, that's interesting
and Brock
too.
Pierce and this kind of thing. So,
because the unpleasant story under the unpleasant fiction of Jeffrey Epstein, right, is really that one of his primary roles was in coordinating what was acceptable and not acceptable research pathing.
Yes.
Right. If he was running a blackmail op, he was running it against all of the people who are profiled in edge.org.
Yes.
And that means he was controlling the cutting edge through coercive pressure, right? And that particular cutting edge probably includes Bitcoin, right?
Right. He also saw that it was pseudo-anonymous at that time, which was much better than bank wires and this kind of thing. And he was in the business of hiding money for big money,
right?
Billionaires.
In the we have all of this computational attention available to us through AI era.
Right. And he was really big in obfuscation for his clients' money. And so Bitcoin comes onto the scene, and it just makes perfect sense that he would be like a moth to a light and gravitate towards Bitcoin.
Right. Any intelligence asset who's active and deployed would be, especially on the front of modern emerging technologies, would absolutely be right there. Like, you would almost be failing at your job if you, from the spy agency perspective, you'd be failing at your job if you weren't there doing that.
Right. And he also saw that Bitcoin had a weak point in that Bitcoin Core didn't have a funding mechanism.
Right.
And he could step in and help fund people like Adam Beck.
Right.
And get their
only
favor.
so long as people took it as The collusion with the cultural side too, right? Like think of the messaging around Bitcoin early on. Had the media approached it as a new programming primitive, like object-oriented programming or something like that, the relational database just got an upgrade from this really neat little project that people should fork and try different stuff with. That would have been a way different story. Bitcoin, the monolith, would have never been given the fertile soil to turn into a cult, right?
And I think he probably helped. He probably helped fund that whole, Bitcoin Core, and installed Brock Pierce in charge of, Bitcoin Core, even though Brock Pierce, didn't have the key, because he wasn't a coder. So
the absence of Satoshi meant they had to first install a pressure point to influence it before they could influence it, unlike with Ethereum, where the only thing you had to do was get the Canadian government to get Vitalik to eat the bugs.
So I don't recall, Andrew, maybe did Epstein learn about Bitcoin through Brock Pierce? Do you know?
Don't remember exactly where he learned about it from. I mean, I know they both swam in a similar circle, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, no kidding. So what are your thoughts, Andrew, on this whole question with Jeffrey Epstein and Brock Pierce? What would we find if we went back in time and could listen in or be in a room with their? Well, they kind of cringed thinking about it. In the room with these evil people.
We've been reading, the Epstein files and stuff like that, and there was discussion between there was an email chain between what's his name? I'm sorry, I'm blanking on this. He was also cutting a bunch of different YouTube promos and stuff like that back in the 2010s.
Not sure.
Antonopoulos, Andres.
Yes.
Yeah, so
he's an interesting figure in all of this. I think there's actually a case that he might be Satoshi too.
I don't think so, but go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely out of left field to see his information go up there, and so I think you would find he was probably running money for somebody too. I mean, he was definitely swimming in the money, so he probably knew how, was communicating with people and connecting people behind the scenes about programming and stuff like that. That's just my speculation. I just go off of what I've seen on the Epstein files. So
sure.
Totally.
I'm not, our time machine is now ended because our questions have ended, but I don't know what I could or would change if I could go back in time and change the whole, regulatory climate of ICOs, which affected Dragon Chain, or because they would have gone after Dragon Chain no matter what. Or if I could go back in time on blockchain and say, hey, Solana, you better fix this issue you're having early on with stability. If you want to be a big player, of course, they've gotten a lot stable now, but it's taken 4 years. And maybe that's why, meme coins went there rather than hardcore development with strong utility needs with smart contracts. I don't know what I would whisper in Vitalik's ear or those group of individuals during the ETC, ETH fork. But there's a lot there that could be discussed. And if we could be a time traveler and change the time continuum and actually move them in a certain direction, it'd be kind of interesting what would happen there. Boy, it would,
assuming we have access to a thing called time that we swim in like fish at all, which is another interesting question.
Right. So
hardly settled in any case.
Yeah, I just thought it was kind of ironic that we're talking about a blockchain time machine this week, and Greg
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
here. It's like
Right.
Greg is in a different time zone.
Oh, no. I
Right.
was simply just doing my best impersonation of Gandalf. Right.
Oh, there you
A
go.
wizard is
Sure.
neither late nor is he early.
Right. So anyway, that kind of concludes today's World Blockchain Roundtable and our questions. And next week's, before we jump into current events, next week we're going to talk about Bitcoin. All these years since 2009, what have we learned? So, 17 years later, what have we learned from Bitcoin? What has it taught us? And what's good, what's bad from those events? And how's it changed our lives, I guess. So that's going to be next week's show. I think it's going to be a good one.
That should be a good one. It certainly has altered the future. Or altered a lot of individual futures.
Oh, most definitely. Before we move on to current events, and I know, Andrew, you're going to need to leave soon. Is there anything else we want to mention in this blockchain time machine conversation?
Nothing. I mean, we've basically covered what I think is interesting.
Yeah. Here's a different question. If you could go back in time and determine who Satoshi Nakamoto was and bring back proof, would you share that proof with the world?
No, I think at some point people had to have, a certain expectation of privacy. And if we're going down to that very narrow level of trying to identify one specific person because they bucked the trend, I think that, we've basically given up on any kind of privacy in the world. So I don't think that would be a good thing.
You could certainly disrupt the market. You could short Bitcoin and then tell everybody who it is.
Right.
Watch it fall in price. That sounds like that's more of an Epstein type of take or action.
Yeah.
An evil manipulation of price. And who's to say a lot of people probably wouldn't believe you unless you could provide solid proof. Obviously, I think we're all in agreement that Craig Wright is not Satoshi Nakamoto, which has also been just found out and proved out in court.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and honestly, like, if you really wanted to make that case and you weren't prepared to bust out your private keys and just send a fractional Bitcoin from the wallet, then, you were telling on yourself.
Simon Dixon talked about how Brock Pierce was trying to convert Simon Dixon into thinking that Wright was Satoshi, and I think that was another evil point of manipulating. But Simon didn't buy it. He didn't take it. He didn't believe him. But Brock Pierce was trying to convince him that, Wright was the actual Satoshi Nakamoto. Crazy. All right. Moving on to current events. Any current events in the blockchain space somebody would like to mention or talk about before we move into the world geopolitical events?
Wow, there's so much, actually. Does anybody have any theories on the reason for the massive price action? Outside of just somebody who'd never sold before sold some.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at the charts, it looks like it's just finding support at the previous all-time high.
Yeah.
But that's my perspective. I mean, it
does kind of renormalize, right?
Yeah, you had to find a foundation to build off of, and that was the previous all-time high. It was about $60,000.
Right. The extra cell capacity on the market was just metabolized in a way that sort of relaxed the price, right?
Yeah.
The trick to the influence of big sell orders isn't really who said it or who did it or what their usual posture is, right? It's that their usual posture is not to participate in selling. And so all the regular people that are selling at a certain price are going based off of price signals that suggest that's profitable, assuming that nobody starts selling who wasn't before.
Right.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is what, around 61,000, excuse me. Well, yeah, right now it's sitting at, by the way, remember on this show, we're not providing financial advice at all. Do your own research. We usually don't talk about price on this podcast. It's actually part of the bylaws, but because we're talking about current events and we've talked about in the past the manipulation of Bitcoin, like Bitcoin Core or speculation, that's why we're discussing it. We went from 73,000 all the way down to 63,000, in the last 2 days. If you look at the 1 day on Bitcoin, you could see there was another big drop all the way down to 61, and it's recovered a little bit down almost to 63.
Right.
And if you look at a 30-day chart, you see the drop off while it was being gradual. I think there was probably a lot of people that were speculating it was going to go back up in chart, because it does kind of correlate well with NASDAQ. If we go a quarter, you can see that drop off is really severe when you look at it in this perspective. And if we take it 1 year,
right,
you can see that it was struggling already. It had fallen from its its high of 124,000, and so we're half of that now.
Well, I think what it means is that the current slate of buyers are not buying to hold long term, right?
Right.
And this previously sort of hodled junk has entered a marketplace that is not going to reach an equilibrium where those kinds of accruers begin to accrue until the price reaches what they perceive as bottom.
Yep.
Right. So we're going to see the price fall until enough folks who see value in taking liquidity out of the market and holding it, feel the pressure to do so from the price decrease, right? At what point does it become a long-term buy again?
Yes.
In a way that induces more buyers into the market or induces existing buyers who have a hold posture into the market, right?
I look at, silver is manipulated, gold is manipulated, oil is manipulated. Bitcoin has to be manipulated as well. It's even a smaller market.
It's probably all under the same distortion. That's probably why the graphs line up between NASDAQ and Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's kind of like they say, our food is fake, our president is fake, our money is fake,
right.
Our prime minister's fake, our dictator's fake.
Now, the interesting question to me is whether that coercive pressure is upward or downward, right? And maybe what we're seeing is sort of the pressure bleed of coercion causing the opposite of what it intends, rather than than vice versa. It could very well be that institutional pressures designed to make the value rise are having the inverse effect on long-term holding.
Right.
I know, they've been drugging the money for a long time. So, they can only manipulate it. The cake can only be remade so many times before it eventually, the shelf life has reached its maximum. And so when you look at Bitcoin Core as price, there's all these people saying, we're going to go this, that, and the other. But really, there's not much room left for them to remix the ingredients for the cake.
Right.
Before
you can't trade price pressure out of the system. You can only move it around within isolated pockets of the system, and eventually that pressure has to relax.
Right. I'm trying to bring up the NASDAQ and how it correlates with Bitcoin. See if I can get a good chart for us. Here you go. This is the 1 day, and here is the 1 year, and it has a small drop off, unlike Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
if we go back to Bitcoin's 1 year, you see that it has fallen off dramatically, and Bitcoin has split with NASDAQ. It was starting to fall kind of like Bitcoin was, but NASDAQ in the end has marched upward for money printing. Again, it's manipulated as well, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, we're still cross-synchronizing the whole thing in terms of dollars, right?
Mhm.
People don't talk about the price of Bitcoin declining in units of Bitcoin per Bitcoin.
Right. Great point. If we take a look at NASDAQ, say a 3 year,
Right.
If
you wonder where the collusion surface is, though, I'm pretty sure all you need to do is point at this thing called the Fed.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, we don't call it collusion; we call it planning, if we believe in it.
Right. So you see that more volatility with Bitcoin, of course, than you do with the NASDAQ. But this chart, from a maximum point of view, from the 80s, 70s to Bitcoin, from 2009, it's somewhat similar, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, they kind of look like action reaction echoes when you think about the chart abstractly. If you just look at it like a spectrogram, what you're seeing is fluctuation over sort of an equilibrium point that's shifting.
Right. So here's a 30-day NASDAQ versus a 30-day Bitcoin, and there certainly has been a break. In what it appears to be a break, in my opinion. But what do I do?
It'd be interesting to see what that price movement looks like in log space.
Yeah.
Like the relative movement of neighborhoods of price across asset classes could be an interesting, very linear looking spectrogram, right? Overlaying them without the fixed point movement might be interesting.
I cannot switch to a logarithmic scale here on this NASDAQ, but
that's too bad.
Here's your logarithmic Bitcoin for 30 days.
Yep. And linear, what's that look like? Let's just say.
What's that?
Let's see what linear looks like.
Switch back to linear.
Yeah, I'll switch back to linear.
Now, it's too bad they don't offer this, but it would be cool to see what second order log of log space looks like. Because that's really where the structure probably hides.
Well, so much for pricing, gentlemen.
I do have to leave here. It's
Andrew, what's your parting wisdom? Your wisdom for the audience today?
Just keep trying to be consistent. It's hard sometimes, but that's the only way you can really move forward in life is being consistent and just keep pushing. It's hard, but keep pushing.
Thank you, sir. Good one. Zach and Lisa.
I'll see you all later. Okay.
Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your words
brother.
of wisdom and your thoughts and traveling with me in this time machine.
It's no problem. It was a wild ride.
And Zach on Legacy Ride. If y'all want to see us talk about something else from a different angle.
But next week, Andrew will dive into this one.
It looks like fun.
Cool.
I'll see you guys later.
Have a safe day. Enjoy.
Later, my friend.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Oh man, it's just a new day, new dollar. I'll when we conclude the show, I'll give you a couple of news information. So that I really can't share with the audience yet.
I know. I know what you're talking about.
Okay. So given that we see that, not going back into the whole pricing thing, that obviously markets are manipulated by big money, nation states get manipulated. We, the people, get manipulated with inflation and, money printer going burr and all kinds of things, or propaganda, what have you.
Well, lately I've been questioning what manipulation even is. right? What is that? What does it really mean to say one has been manipulated, right? Like, how would we characterize the shape of manipulation as a surface, right?
Yeah, well, let's take a look at differently from a positive and negative perspective. If a person has the wrong way of thinking, or so says one group or an individual, and they want to manipulate the person into thinking differently or to match their perspective, then they might manipulate history, data.
Right.
Finance.
So it's not really that they're manipulating people, it's that they're manipulating the fixed artifacts people navigate from.
Right. Look at how news in this country was disseminated. It used to be 3 major networks. And what they said must be true because there was no alternative opinion that was really out there. It was much more difficult to find. And the government knew this. There's Project Mockingbird and all kinds of things. So
yeah, but it's a really weird metric when you think about it, because there is no like the people as an actor, right? And the way that we aggregate and sample what we say the people mostly believe is itself another layer of compression over that compression, right? So by the time we're actually talking Turkey, we're already talking about an abstraction on a number of prior abstractions centered along the idea of things that are non-agentic have the ability to choose futures, and it bothers me to think that there are agentic intelligences out there like us that that have collapsed that middle process so much that they think their choices are directly influencing individuals. Rather than influencing the architectures by which individuals make sense of reality.
Wow, you and I are really on a different page here.
Well, I mean, and it's well, I mean, that's my whole worldview does not include a collective malicious actor as a possibility. I take Mises very literally when I say only individuals act.
See, and I'm switching more of one mind way of thinking, in that we're all connected. We're all essentially one.
Right.
One mind.
And I would call that true within the frame of like, yes, they overlap. All the surfaces we can agree on are what consensus looks like. And all of the ones we can't are what persists of distinction while we try to coordinate the other. Right? It's only when we start insisting that overlap must be complete, that the Venn diagram of society and individuality must be a circle. That we start getting into the place where there's no distinction between an institution as a pseudo actor and the individuals that compose that institution as the actors that make that real. Right? Because nobody's going to work at any of those agencies doing anything other than thinking, I'm a do-gooder, I'm going to do good, I'm going to save the world, right? How do you have that attitude and have the result feel so, oppressively malicious at global scale?
Oh, right? I got an answer for you on that one. Picture sheep in a field and sheepdogs working in tandem to move the sheep maybe either away from the cliff or to get them clustered together. The sheep are thinking, wow, I got to stay with everybody. I don't want to get close to this dog that's hurting me to the right or to the left. And, the
right. And the dog is under a similar kind of pressure, right, from its relationship with its task and its master.
Right.
As is the shepherd, right? Like, so where does action reside in a system of shepherding that's imposed upon everyone globally, right? Is it imposed by the sheepdog, or is it imposed by the synchronization that we all agree to when we join the system implicitly? Well, it's really more like we're joining the timing and cadence of somebody else that's not local when we start introducing what we call coercion.
Right. Because a dog is using coercion to keep the sheep together.
Yeah, but the dog is also coerced, right? The dog is also coerced. Dogs may naturally be bred to herd sheep
That's
by
where I was
nature.
going. They're bred
But
that
the
way.
breeding program itself was a structure designed to produce a dog that did that, right? And to
Right.
produce a dog that does that, you have dog training as a standard regime, which is, master slave coercion training at its core, right?
Yes. Yes.
And yet the person who trains the sheepdog from the stock of bred sheepdogs to do the thing,
who is the son
also a
or
product of
daughter
a system.
sheep herder.
Right. It's
Right.
also the product of a system that coercively subordinates us to somebody else's non-local experience.
Mhm.
We are not choosing to be shepherds when there is a shepherd regulatory agency insisting we do our job a certain way or we're criminals, right? But is there a loop, right? Is there another layer? Right? Do the coercers themselves subject themselves to a certain kind of coercion and up the chain? Where does it end? Does the Ouroboros in fact eat its tail, or is there a head? I think my position is more like the tail and the head are self-consuming, and yours is more like there's a head somewhere. That's probably the distinction I would draw between our two positions.
Yeah, maybe so. Again, going back to the idea of one mind and we're all interconnected. And so if I hurt you or harm you, I'm also harming myself.
Right.
And those who don't believe in that ideology that we are all connected, we're all one person, one mind, then that's where superiority complexes come in. This is why people harm others, because they don't believe it's harming themselves.
Right. The degree to which we internalize a non-local frame of what harm means.
Right. Yeah. It's a wide range there just in itself.
Right.
If you pick
exactly.
Out
but I guess to circle back to the malice behind the point, right? The notion of malice. How far back do we have to go before we find a prime mover? Is it Nebuchadnezzar? Is it before? When did families become tribes, become coercion architectures? That required a threat.
What was the learning process?
A vague non-local threat, right?
Yeah.
In order to coerce local action.
What was that learning process like? Well, I'm not going to steal your water if you don't steal my water. And a truce is developed.
As far back as I've been able to trace it is the Temple of Ishtar under the Akkadian regime, where first official records of a position in the administration called timekeeper became a thing.
Timekeeper, really?
Yeah, that was something that the Code of Hammurabi implemented specifically and explicitly in that regime, and it came from prior regimes, right?
Wow.
The idea of global synchronization, when you are in what we call my domain, your time and my time are the same thing. And when I mean your time and my time, I mean my time is your time, or else, right? You pay when I say it's time. You do this when I say it's time. April 15th ends at midnight, right? You have to first assume a global clock before you can have any of that. And how is that imposed? Well, ask Hammurabi.
Wow. Hammurabi. I'm asking Grok about that.
Yeah.
I want to hear tally marks on bones. Wow. 20,000 to 25,000 years ago, in Democratic Republic of Congo or older, may have likely recorded lunar phases of days and months. Is a potentially old time, but no written text exists in this era. So the timekeeper maybe have been more like you're saying, 3,500, 3,000 BCE. And,
right. Who decides when taxes are due?
Right. And the creation of the sundial and water clocks.
Well, that's still local, though, right? Like, it doesn't actually hurt that much to coordinate across a town. Yeah.
Ancient inscription on tombs, 1500 BCE, provided some of the earlier references to water clocks and shadow devices, Babylonian clay tablets, and later Greek Roman text. 30 BCE documents widespread usage of time, functionality.
Right.
Indian text and I can't pronounce it. Issues or whatever. 505 CE, which also describes water clocks.
Right.
6th century China. Wow.
Yep. Or how about, there's a really interesting one. Ask it about the very first orchestra conductor that subordinated the players to the conductor's rhythm. He used to bang a pole on the ground rather dramatically. Oops, you're muted.
I don't want people to hear me typing. Jean-Baptiste Lully, 17th century Baroque era, uses a heavy wooden staff, a modern baton, in French originally meant as a staff pounded audibly on the floor to mark the beat. This was common because orchestras were growing larger and larger and needed more clear audible pulse between silent visual conducting became standard.
Well, and he found tempo drift to be obnoxious as opposed to part of the art.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
So what's tempo drift right now in our world?
Tempo drift? I mean, well, if you think about it as active persistence, then standing in place is a way to turn in circles. There's a return geometry to it, right? You stand in place and you watch the clock go round and round from one beginning to another, and then we count them, right? That gives us interval.
Right.
And once you have interval, you have to square ultimately with the distinctions that what we call space-time curvature makes on the tiny drift of every clock from every other clock, right? Individually in the moment, it seems like a cheap thing to re-update your own internal perception of now to the tick of something coordinated over here rather than in here, right? You internalize sort of an ambient sense of the pace of the rhythm of moment to moment.
When the next sound wave is going to come through and you're going to hear the next sound wave.
Right. And typically that was ordered relationally. The orchestra prior to him did exist and did in fact synchronize. It just didn't synchronize to the conductor's internal metronome, right? So the conductor that invented this thing was like, you know what? I'm going to overbear the orchestra with this clack, clack, clack. And the only way they can make the dissonance disappear is by playing an order to it, right? It entrained individuals to a non-local time.
Oh, interesting.
That is the essence.
And then we
of
developed
power.
all kinds of time, 3/4 time, 1/4
That
time.
is once you have a distinct rhythm, you can have polyrhythms. But I was also in a prog rock band in college, and I can tell you that the only thing that annoyed us more than our drummer's insistence that the timing had to map to him perfectly was that his own timing had to map to a metronome perfectly, right? He could still have executed those polyrhythms with a fluid metronomic rate.
But
and
he
we could
needed
have
to hear
adapted.
metronome.
Exactly. And I juxtaposed that to my last band I was in before I quit being in bands. We had a terrible drummer, like from virtuosity standpoint, but a great drummer from the standpoint that he could keep playing through any flub, right?
Nice.
So we could actually synchronize to him. And the rhythm was like halting and then racing and then fluid. And then all of a sudden it would sync up into something beautiful for a moment before it went into dissonance. Nobody was ordering that, right? It was simply the local return geometry expressing itself in the echo of each room, right? And that feels more natural. That's when you have a band that doesn't feel stilted. It's when you can get into a space and get with the flow of where you are as opposed to an imagined flow of a somewhere else that's global. Right.
It's fascinating because you start thinking about the various times, like 1 2 3 1 3, 1, 2,
Mhm.
3, 1, 2, 3, the waltz, and then there's a more complicated all the way to the point
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Well, I mean, and imagine going like this, because these are the kind of rhythms we played with. We'd go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Next part, right?
Yeah.
It was weird, but it worked. You know, time is a lot more flexible than we like to imagine.
Mhm. Also, when we were talking about the sound waves, it kind of made me think of the empty space between atoms and that gap. But it's
Mhm.
actually electric. It's the positive and negative
Mhm.
fields that separate the atoms. You
Well,
know,
it's
so-
or
and
more, even more generally speaking, we can say pressure imbalances, right?
true.
Right.
Oh,
Ultimately,
that are
for a
that
system, for a closed system to cohere into a single unit
right,
that you can
and
perceive as an object.
vibrations affecting the next atom, the next one, the next one.
Right. Well, it's not even really vibration so much as vibration is the from the inside visible artifact of what it looks like when things bumping up into one another minimize how much friction is caused by the bumping. Right.
Mhm.
You can see at the tiny level order cascade in emergent fashion, right? At the observer grain, where we're looking at ourselves as if we're a thing, as opposed to a collection of different cells that are also collections of different smaller structure that are also all locally synchronized to their own local times,
Mhm.
right? The biological subjective experience of time is really more like the way that we make sense of the fact that we're all sort of phase difference between head and toe and every part in between.
Right. Well, and then we become more aware of cycles and the lunar schedule, the seasons of the year, and
Right,
the seasonality even of the sun,
right.
like every
The
11
rhythm
years.
of the physical geometry of return is a rich
Mhm.
experience when you
Mhm.
experience it sensorially, but when you experience it as a command from a single metric with no backing in physical reality whatsoever, it's
Mhm.
thin. It feels like a separate observable rather than a thing trying to subsume the way you observe.
So I have a question for you. The society psyche of, like, right now, people are nervous or have a view, like an impending feeling that something traumatic is going to change in humanity's life, or what do you think is the cause of that? Is that propaganda from those who are in charge, who are in charge of different media points?
No, I think it's a
Or
felt thing.
is that something that we're sensing?
I think it's a synchronization drift ultimately. Like the cost to be on the time, the
Mhm.
official global monolithic time, where only one thing happens in each moment and it can be recorded and appropriately regulated, right?
Mhm.
Versus the reality of which there's a profusion of nows across every individual locality, and squishing those down into one linear global moment and saying only this happened before this happened, and then all the other stuff that happened slightly time
Mhm.
slotted before or after, right? That's how we
So
rationalize it.
sure.
That's
So
not really
then
what's going on.
define trends, like trend investing or trends in human behavior from a geopolitical standpoint.
I think that that falls outside of the communicable bandwidth, outside of local experience, right? Like, as
Mhm.
in uh, the stories we tell. If we're talking about renormalization, group flow type of physics, right, where you take a finer grained thing, you group it into the features that define them most coherently as a group, and then
Yeah.
you pretend like they're one thing. Our brains do that naturally. That's why we see smooth reality instead of little tiny pinpricks bumping up against what appears to be empty space, right?
Mhm.
We experience touching things even though we physically never make contact with things in the sense of atomic physics, right? Um, those interactions are little measurements, right?
Yeah.
That force certain conclusions at the sort of commensurability layer between parallel possible happenings that we call quantum mechanics, right? Literally just continuing to sit here and refusing to move means the quantum state of the air across the room is not impacted by your walking through it. Right?
In fact,
So
it is.
the airflow in the room is consistent with me sitting here, as opposed to me standing over there while I'm sitting here. Right? I feel the air temperature of where I'm sitting. I feel the temperature of the chair I'm sitting on. I do not feel the temperature of the door handle across the room.
Right.
Right. I am not synchronized to it unless I try to imagine what its local experience is like and try to import it over here. Right. The door handle, I'm guessing, is as cold as metal typically is, but it might not be. It doesn't really matter to me in this moment unless I bring it into the conversation. Right. I just change the frame from chair plus what you can see plus a door nobody else can see on the other side of the room. Interesting. You all just synchronize that visual.
Right.
We
And
have
picture
a
the
certain
different
amount
door
of
than-
limited capacity to make distinguishments. And when we make distinguishments, we make measurements and we synchronize to those, and they force certain futures to reify and others to not be possible. And it is the blur that exists between our endogenous perception of what the return geometries look like locally and feel like locally, me sitting here, not getting up and moving. Right? That's something you can describe to somebody else, but you can't get into the why of it without talking to me, right? Why am I not getting up and walking across the room? Well, ask me. But to ask me, you have to know me. You have to be able to remind me of this particular moment, right? Imagine somebody who's never met me before remembering this exact conversation and bringing it up later, just blithely, without first seeding into the conversation that they saw the show and reminding me of the fact that I said this. Right? It wouldn't synchronize. It wouldn't make sense to me. Not at first. Only after enough back and forth caused enough distinctions to be made. I'll show you the video. Somebody could say, I could re-give an opinion on it from that moment. But from their standpoint, the last time they saw me, that's what I did. Right? So to them, it's fresh in mind with the face. So their local moment is out of sync with mine. And yet we all can look at the clock right now and say that we've been in the show for exactly 1 hour and 21 minutes and 57 and counting seconds, right up to the edge of what we call noon Central Time. You know, it's going to be going on until then, we say. But in reality, what we're doing is all agreeing to the fiction that noon exists wherever you're listening. Right?
Well, it's maybe not the fiction that it doesn't exist, or it does exist. It's
noon is a monolith whereby we can refer to it as if it were outside of us.
Yeah, it's a standard we agreed to.
Right, but that pre-agreement is an agreement to continuously prepay the cost of synchronizing to it.
Right. Just like the value of the dollar, it's faith-based.
Right. Well, the value of a dollar is really more of an artifact of markets than it is anything else, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
Right.
That's what a price.
Scarcity
a price is the ultimate compression of value, right?
As well as scarcity. That plays
or actually, no, it's really an artifact of the process of the ultimate compression of value, right? Pricing a thing is a process. The price is what you get in hindsight. Yeah, and we agree to coordinate on price only because no other signal can be communicated meaningfully across enough people, right? If we were to start talking about, well, there's two prices and you have to multiply them, and one of those prices is based on this and that and the other, you will not sell that product, right? That's why most people feel a little queasy about sales tax, because they didn't think about it beforehand all that much, right? They planned to spend $100 at the grocery store and they only got $92 worth of stuff before they were over budget.
By the way, what do you think of dynamic pricing? That's kind of different.
I like it.
We're seeing that. We're seeing that really.
It's a relocalization of the price signal. It allows it to diversify to your needs specifically.
Now, let me ask you this: what if it had a camera attached to it, and when it saw you walking up, and it believed that you had more means, more money than you do?
Well, then it's probably caught me in a calmer, more smiley, more accommodating, more interested in purchasing frivolities mood, in which case it might be welcome, depending on what it's telling me I might buy with it.
So it raises the price based off of your mood, based off who they believe you are.
It's negotiating a price with
me. More
me.
they can milk out of you by.
No, I think more it's an invitation to negotiate a purchase.
Oh, I don't think so. It's one-sided.
Well,
Where's your negotiation?
it's not one-sided in the fact that you can choose to not buy.
Here would be here's something for the audience.
At what point does the cost of buying grocery store milk, dude, imagine the price of grocery store milk going up so much that buying a milk cow started making sense.
Well, that's
the world we live in right now.
You will push it to that level, up to that point where it's just not
as far as it can go.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not as far as it can go in like literal objectively breaks for everyone terms. Mm-hmm. But it's not as far as it can go for people with extra to spend. Right.
Imagine
saying, I'm going to capitalize on this person's willingness to pay.
Right. Imagine doing a test where dynamic pricing is for that gallon of milk, where one person goes in a nice, Armani suit and walks up to go buy milk. And so there's an assessment made based off of what they look like and maybe history of purchases. And then another person who looks more like they're homeless, but might have a lot more money or wealth or a lot of cash in their pocket than the person with the Armani suit.
Right. That might
30 minutes later to the milk.
That might skew an individual case, but in the aggregate, it'll balance, right? Ultimately, what that might even permit is for people who would otherwise not be able to afford it to be offered a price lower than uniform pricing would allow.
Yeah. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong for the company to do dynamic.
Right. No, I'm just saying it might be a more benefit than harm. Executed rightly, right? Like if it's not built in a way that is so extractive, it can't continue until unless you have a continuous supply of ongoing dupes.
But that's assuming let's say we're just picking on Walmart. That's assuming that Walmart is not making a judgment call or says, I don't want this homeless person buying a gallon of milk.
Right. They might be, but Target
and pricing it accordingly. I want the person with the nice suit to buy the milk and pay less for it.
Right. And my point is that distinction may not travel. That might be the basis upon which somebody sets a policy. But that policy setting may do nothing but create a system whereby prices can be flexible based on need.
But it does bring a point of the pricing. Is it done benevolently? I can't speak.
Right. Nothing's done benevolently, but pricing is done mindful of your competitors.
True.
Right.
True. Or what the market will bear
if one system extracts more and another system passes on more to people who can afford less.
Or what the market will bear at that moment in that store, in that city, in that county. Oh, where'd you go? Well, anyway, that's kind of fascinating point.
It was breakfast.
Oh, nice. Fascinating point about dynamic pricing and blockchain, historical pricing stored on a blockchain was fascinating concept or idea. But we just don't know what, like, again, I'm picking a Walmart or just making a metaphor. If it were Walmart and dynamic pricing, what is their ultimate gain? What is the ultimate cost to the shopper? Is it fair? It's not up to the Walmart Corporation to be fair or not. It's up to Walmart Corporation.
Right, it's not really about fairness so much as whether or not their profits rise.
It's about maximizing their profit.
Right. Maximizing profit in a competitive market, though, inevitably applies downward pressure on pricing, not upward. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So allowing for dynamic pricing means that you can charge more to people who can pay more, which would reduce the cost at the mass market level in the aggregate.
You would hope.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're competing,
but eventually the person with the Armani suit might
doing so, right?
Right. But the person with the Armani suit might be able to catch on to this idea that if I wear, they know my face now with facial recognition, I might go to save money if I buy my milk at Target.
We inevitably will, right?
Store.
Like my uncle, who is a successful surgery center owner and surgeon in the place he lives, he would always buy cars used by getting his family in their scuzzy yard work clothes after a day of chores, ideally, and then going with cash in hand as his notion. Like, we need to buy this car. I need it for my big family. We're so poor was the implication, right?
Right.
And and then instead of interest in the the no credit financing they offer him at the end, as the dollar signs hit their eyes, he's like, no, I'll just write a check from Dr. James Hamilton, right? Like, and the dealer's pissed because they made a bad deal, right? There's bad deals on both sides, right?
Sure.
Some people who could pay less if they were more structured about it pay more, and some people who can't afford to pay anything but the bare minimum get the bare minimum deal because otherwise there's no sale, right?
Yeah.
And the goal in mass markets is always more sales, not higher prices, because the one will aggregate you a net win one time, and the other will aggregate you a continuing profit machine, right? That grows. Right, you get more people, you can charge less.
Not financial advice, but Greg, now I have you here. I'm going to pick your brain on the AI dilemma. Is AI and all these data centers, the first question is, are the data centers for surveillance, or are they to get us to a point where AI becomes super intelligent, general AI? What is the purpose of all these data centers, in your opinion?
The data centers are a natural product of trying to force the system that they've built to scale when synchronization capacity is finite, right? They're pretending that adding more compute creates more compute capacity, when in fact adding more compute muddies the compute channel. I think that the fact that we have to pay exponentially more for each subjective gain is proof that that pouring more into this fire is a way to bleed acquisition of the end result. It's wasted money, in the sense that there's probably a way that we can organize and do this that doesn't have that cost curve, but it requires us to abandon certain notions that we take for granted.
So it's ultimately data centers, to dumb this down for myself.
It's data centers to pay the synchronization cost at the microchip level.
Right. Rather than trying to do it like, say, DeepSeek at more of a software level.
Right. Or to closely examine the primitives of computing and recognize where we're making assumptions that don't map well to physical reality.
And it's also not a place for storage for surveillance.
No, surveillance is not the thing that drives the data centers. The data centers being there as a need of paying this cost and the things that they store drive the exploitation of it.
So,
right?
But more data.
The fact that people want these tools is what enables the tools to be repurposed for surveillance on the other side of it.
But more data is being captured, and more AI compute time and efforts are taken on the data that's being captured. Example, flock cameras.
Right. And the more they capture, the less they can perceive. Still, AI doesn't fix that for them.
Yes,
it changes the scale. No, it changes the scale at which they can
human,
gather.
If you're looking at a car driving through a city and to a specific address, maybe you wanted to find out if this car arrived and committed a crime, for example,
right,
at a particular location. It would take humans a lot of time to go through all of the data on the flock cameras to determine if,
and to really know. It would actually take that, is the thing I'm saying here, right?
I didn't follow you.
Instead
AI
would
be able, but hold on, let me finish. AI would be able to track that car and find out and figure out that car arrived at that location and went through point A, B, C, and D, and then veered off, skipped F and G, and popped onto N camera.
Right. So long as the operation of AI requires that we do the pre-setup and prepayment for the surveillance cost, right? For it to work. For AI to work, we right now have to gather all that data. And right now, the gathering of all that data enables the surveillance, right? If all they wanted to do was make people use a machine all the time that said where they were, and that was the only benefit we got from AI, nobody would pay the cost of the infrastructure.
Right. And right now, the cost of that infrastructure is through tax credits, through government printing, through
it's being padded.
Yeah, and it's all this, lending of money between each other of all these
Right.
different
But one can
companies.
make the same argument about the interstate highway system, right?
Sure.
That
But
it enabled federal policing because
Mhm.
you could get from DC to LA faster and more
Sure.
conveniently. But in reality, what it did was it gave people a utility that then enabled that as well.
Yeah. And the original
Right.
idea was to get the tank from the
Right.
East Coast
And
to
nobody
the
was
West
keen
Coast
on the
faster.
idea that we needed to stop constructing easy travel to prevent the government from doing that. Right.
Mhm. So do you think, but to go back to the data centers and this thing, do you think it's a giant bubble like the .com?
I think what it is more like, okay, let's see if we can come up with a good example. What's a societal paradigm we know failed for sure? Like you look back at history and it's like, yeah, we're not going to try that again.
Moon landing. No, just kidding.
Let's see. How about phrenology? Phrenology is a great one. At one point in
Phrenology?
time, phrenology. At one point in time, you could pay for an instructive course learning how to tell if someone was a criminal by feeling the shape of their head.
Okay.
Literally was a thing, right?
Right.
We don't do that anymore because we now know that was stupid. And all
It didn't work.
the outcomes we were fabricating were in fact
Right.
wholly fabricated by our
Right.
imaginations. It didn't map to reality, right? A lot of people were probably imprisoned and or lobotomized because of that, right? The thing that we're doing with this is we're calling what we get, a prose generation tool that we can then slap through computational architectures that we've had forever, right? Ever since computers existed, we could queue things up and subject them to authorization and all this stuff, right? The fact that we can do that at such, with such verbal fluidity now makes all those things intelligible to people that were there before, right?
Mhm.
What we haven't done is figure out how to make what our brains do happen in computers. We're calling a thing intelligence that is not. Because if that were the case, then you wouldn't need a data center. This thing runs on 20 watts at peak cycle, or at average cycle, and at peak 80 watts, right?
Mhm.
That's not even enough to power one GPU.
Right.
So how on earth have we mistaken what we're building for what's in here is the question that I have. And I think what we're going to find out is that ultimately this system is just like the old one, just pressing the scale of it as hard as we can because we can make more of it intelligible all at once with less effort. But that has its limits, right?
Right.
Otherwise, there would have been a lot more obvious difference between GPT-4 and GPT 5.5. It seems like right now, though, we're hitting the band limit of what we can pay to get more results out of.
Sure. Yeah,
And I think that scaling it is going to yield finer and finer refinements until the market no longer supports the financing of the infrastructure.
right. Because I think that also our GDP's growth is one of kind of fiction, in that the GDP growth is built out of these data centers that aren't really paying for themselves yet. So,
well, and from an insider's perspective, I have to say,
no problem.
and this hasn't been publicly announced or even really fully developed yet. It's just in the early discussions phase.
Mhm.
But Joe and I are going to bring something to the world that is going to rock this paradigm.
Interesting.
The research I've been doing is about to be combined with the innovation of Dragon Chain, is all I will say.
Nice. Wow.
And we're going to build
Well, for it.
something new, something that maybe people will think of as actual intelligence.
Innovative. Nice.
Well, I mean, and not dependent on
well-
any kind of data center cluster to make it work.
Sure. In my opinion, I'm hopeful that AI could lead us to a non-scarcity economy, and I've talked a lot about a post-labor economy where we've relied more on machines and automation to do a lot of the mundane, and we can spend our time, how we wish to, kind of a
Mhm.
free moment of rather not the Star Trek world, but getting closer to that Star Trek world. However, it does require that those in charge, shall we say, the tech bros or the Epstein class, or however you want to define them, those in charge of at the top levels of AI, kind of get out of the way and want to act more on a benevolent level, and rather than a dehumanization or combining humans with machine. Uh, you know, so I think we could go down that path, but right now, as I see it, that path option is shrinking. We don't. I don't think that we are going down that road towards that
Right.
wonderful, not utopian, but a better society for humanity at this point. Rather, I see that with the debt levels that corporations have, individuals have, and obviously nation states have, that a lower population solves a lot of those issues. And
Or
I think they've done the math.
in the inverse, it will have the opposite effect as intended, and because they've misunderstood something fundamental about how the world's ordered.
I would hope you're right, Greg.
I'm beyond hope on that one, right? Like, as far as I'm concerned, what I was just talking about. No, I was just talking about regarding what we're going to do with AI with Joe, vaguely referencing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a forced thing, right? The pressure to create such a system comes from doing it wrong in a way that's going to cost us.
Sure.
All over the country, there are people trying to answer this question right now, in all likelihood. And the difficulty is compressing the breadth of multiplicity of all the possible tries that people are making right now inside our bitty local frame. We can't generalize what 8 billion people are doing in their momentary nows if we start with the assumption that there's one global now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I really think that the idea of a global now is the thing that's not commensurate at the scale we're at. I think that's the idea that breaks our ability to see that in reality, when synchronization structures fracture like they are, people stop living by them.
Sure, of course.
It's all the people who don't go online and read the news, and all the people that show up on this channel instead of watching CNN.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fragmentation that happens, we think, right now, as an act of willful rebellion, when in reality that might be the natural consequence of trying to force what's natively not global monolithic metronomic timed into that system so precisely that people can't fit anymore.
Let me ask you this. What do you think the biggest pain point of people in the US is right now? The average American?
Biggest pain point? Stress.
Stress caused by
experienced stress of the pending future.
So doom scrolling
now is
doom scrolling has created
tomorrow.
the stress. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's economic by nature. I think it's the crushing blow of inflation, wage stagnation, the gap between inflation and wages, the higher cost of living, the less stability in employment, and all of those things are causing that stress. And I think that's the biggest pain. And the government is not there to help. The government is not there to help, and corporations are not there to help. They're actually working against those same individuals that are having that point. And please don't think.
I think that imparts agency to a thing that can't hold it, though, right? Corporations aren't doing anything. The people that work for them are.
Right. No, but the corporation exists for the corporation to continue to exist. That's it.
Right. Exactly. It is a continuation scaffold. I agree with that. I just don't think that it chooses anything. It's the people who maintain it that continue it.
No, I agree. We're in agreement there. Right. I just think that economic problem that is growing and growing in this world.
We can't I would caution
There's a
against compressing it entirely to economics, right? Because emotions are uneconomical, and yet they are the things we experience when we experience stress.
I think that's the number one stress point is economics. In the house.
There's a cognitive economic overlap where that problem is actually arising. Because we can't step outside our brains and imagine economics as a system that doesn't influence the thinking of its thinking members.
I guess where I'm going, Greg, is I think, innovation is trying to solve a problem that in the marketplace, right? And
well, I don't think innovation's trying to do anything.
Well, no, okay, all right, maybe we're getting stuck on words.
Well, I mean, they're important though, right?
What's that?
The literal definitions of things matter if we want to make sense of anything.
Okay. Sure. All right. Well, then try to finish my point. What was I saying?
You mean transduce it into the way I would phrase it?
Yes.
Okay. I would say that the system overall that coheres civilization is a pressure surface that contains economic coordination, coercive coordination of many different stripes, and that the idea that we can generalize that to a global individual experience that maps to any one individual's experience is the assumption we're making that is breaking things. And when we compress that through economics, you get exactly the kind of economic turmoil you are talking about. But that is not distinct. That is not a distinct and separate pressure surface from the same way that coercive architectures are being distorted, or that interpersonal architectures are being distorted. It's more like a gravity that we inhabit, a semantic gravity, a drift away from meaning that maps to to an undistorted or an uncurved meaning space. And the fact that we all can't step outside of that curvature and examine it from without, because it lives in here, and so do we.
So all of that
it means that we can't see that the same way fish can't see the water they swim in.
Right. But all of that comes down to stress. You said that was the number one issue for Americans.
Stress would be the local lived experience from inside of that pressure imbalance being pushed on to individuals.
So I'm saying that the majority of the stress, forget it, culture, family, whatever, is brought about by the economic struggles that the average person in America is having.
Right.
It's
that
not
may well
all.
be true.
Others are doing very well right now.
Right.
Well,
it's the contrast, right?
Right.
And the interpersonals that come from that.
Sure. So, and to try to eliminate that stress, just like we saw in the Depression, was the movie theater, right? People went to the movie theater to relieve that stress or not think about their problems, their economic problems.
Right.
I think we're living in that right now.
Yeah.
Again.
And I would reframe that as sort of the rehoming of agency from without.
Sure.
People come to believe through the way that we condition them, from the time they're born to the time they die, that their relationship to now is contingent upon a global order controlled by somebody else. When in reality, it is the internalization of that fiction that sets them up to have that frame to begin with. And that to fix civilization, we can't just fix the way we handle economics. We have to fix the way we handle the underlying error that causes the drift. Otherwise, we'll find our way back to the problem sooner than later.
Well, it also is like you were talking about, all those different systems that come together at different ways, or systems that may not even interact with each other, but they still land on the individual, creating stress.
Right. Essentially, all of the system's unresolved ambiguities right now are getting exported onto individuals, and we are expected to silently eat the cost without compensation.
Right.
And that expectation comes from pressures that do not pay the bills and do not feed you. Right. They come from pressures that keep you from getting caged, or that keep you from getting ostracized, or that keep you from losing the place of pride that your family offers you because
Right.
you're the provider or whatever, right? Like these
And
things
right
are the
now-
real pressures.
Exactly. And right now, the people who are running these AI systems are not selling it in a way that these AI systems are going to help you in the future. Your system, the stress that you're feeling right now, the AI systems are not. I don't think they're
Right.
capable of it anyway.
Right. They're animal farm windmills right now, right?
Yes.
They're never going to be used to disperse the stress of productivity. They're just going to be used to make productivity more scalable.
Yes.
Right. It has nothing to do with you working less. It has everything to do with your work being more atomic.
So, Greg, what do you see in 2027, 2028 in the AI space and its impact on humanity and that stress point?
I think we're on the verge of a silent technological revolution. Actually, I think that in reality, the structures that make what we call intelligence useful to us can be attained without any of the data centers. If we change the way that we think about how intelligence is architected from a code level, and if we did it right, is my contention. Then we can have all the benefits without all the synchronization overhead of the mega data centers and the knock-on consequences of that from surveillance and economic interventionism and all of these things that the massive data that we right now have to have if we want this convenience.
So the average person in 2027.
enables.
So the average person in 2027, next year, 6 months from now,
A new competitor will emerge and destroy all the existing players, and no one will use that old paradigm anymore, just like 8 tracks. That's what I think is going to happen.
That's what you think. Yeah, kind of like.
Well, I think that's going to happen
worried
because
about-
I'm actively involved in
Exactly.
developing a thing that could do that.
Example is DeepSeek. How people talked about it using less computing power and more code.
Right.
In solving a lot of
What if the
these issues.
software of intelligence automatically scaled to fit the compute substrate and just slowed
in other words, the
down,
limit- what
slowed
you're
down
saying is-
rather than not
Let
working?
me ask you this. So, in other words, you don't have to pay as much for a limited amount of bandwidth to be able to get your answer in a slower time frame.
More like, in order to orchestrate a global network of information, you don't have to have one monolithic point of reference for data. That data can be ephemeral and local entirely, and it need not be stuffed through a pipeline that centralizes it where somebody who wants to drink from it with the big freaking hose can get at it.
Right.
Right. It'll go back to being a lot more
centralized
like
for control of what data goes in and what data goes out.
It'll be a lot more like trying to find somebody in a phone book without a direct reference than it will be, like there's 40 Greg Blings in here. What the hell? How am I supposed to track this guy down? Says the investigator who's already under stress to work on 20 cases, right? Like that will be the world without the centralized data, right? And imagine all of that running. Like imagine you turn off your internet connection and ChatGPT just keeps working. Right. Like that's the world we could be in. Like there's no need to have an internet connection to run the OS on your phone, right? What if that OS were itself a system that could do what ChatGPT does and then everything else, right? And that moreover that the software could be designed in a way that when you install it on the machine, you don't have to know anything about the machine because it just moves to fill the available computation space as it evolves, right? And then stops growing once it hits the limit. And that's when it reaches out to other nodes in this voluntary network that doesn't operate on an ACK-retry confirmation register that creates a data trail from all those interactions. What if it was a one-way network, feed forward only?
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this all over again so I get it. Well,
I've got some stuff to share with you that's cool
Yeah.
that I think will help make sense of it. I've written some more on it.
Sweet.
It's not public yet.
Sweet.
I call it chronophenomenology, by the way. That's the name of the paper.
That's why I see invented chrono pump. Your title.
That's the software.
We are close to our 2-hour mark. I'm gonna cut us off there. And I appreciate everyone that's watching right now. be sure and give it a like wherever you're watching this and share. And, it doesn't cost you anything to just give it a thumbs up or click on a share button to get this information out far and wide. I appreciate everybody. Remember, we're going to talk about next week's show, World Blockchain Roundtable, same place, same channel, is going to be about what did we learn, from Bitcoin. 17 years later, we're 17 years into Bitcoin. What did we learn? And so we'll take a path of information, learning, and
TLDR a
applying
lot.
it to the future. Applying it to the future. Sometimes we learn from our mistakes, right? And sometimes we learn from our successes, obviously, and we add to our future successes from both of those. Points. All right. Well, everybody, Greg, where can we find you? Where can we read about the things that you're doing and your papers?
2 places. One, presently, you can go on Substack, designheretic.substack.com, and all of it's free. You don't have to subscribe. You can just read. Lots of people do. I have 11 subscribers, and the view count is a lot higher. So please don't even bother subscribing if you'd rather not identify yourself to me. Please do if you want to make me more visible because you like what you read. The other place is Watch This Space, because while an official announcement is still forthcoming and the details are still in flux, Dragon Chain is not in the AI space yet because it's not interested in it. Let's put it that way.
Good. Good info. All right. Well, again, thank you everybody for watching. We miss you, Sean, Joe, Zach, and Lisa. We miss you. We hope to see you here next week. Next week is, I guess, here on World Blockchain Roundtable is where you can find me. And here on din.social, just takes an email to sign up. Thank you, everybody. And we will go out with John McAfee, and we'll see you next week.
America's not the government, people. The America is you. It is the Grand fucking Canyon, the Rocky Mountains, the deserts of the Southwest, the Pacific fucking Ocean, the Atlantic fucking Ocean. It is the grandest continent. And what the fuck have you people done? You have turned yourself into sheep, every goddamn one of you.